Today in the Texas Tribune Weekend Insider. This week, the U.S. Supreme Court agreed to hear the anti-affirmative action case of two white students denied admission to the University of Texas. Morgan Smith explains. Then reporter Jay Root looks into a law that allows state officials to retire and collect their pensions without leaving their jobs.
In 2008, two white students were denied admissions to the University of Texas. They were not in the top 10% of their class. They were probably in the top 12% of their class. So they were denied admissions and were upset about it, and so they connected with Edward Bloom, who has been an activist against affirmative action and race-based public policy. Bloom was looking for the ideal plaintiffs to bring an anti-affirmative action lawsuit. Texas was an ideal place to look for them because before it had had an affirmative action policy, it had had to explore race-neutral admissions because affirmative action was illegal in Texas for a period of time. This week, the U.S. Supreme Court agreed to hear this case. It caused a lot of ripples because many people believe that they wouldn't have agreed to hear it unless they had serious doubts about what the admissions policy was doing at Texas. So if they decide against the policy at Texas, that could have huge effects on university admissions and the use of race at universities all over the country. The other aspect of this, the Supreme Court agreeing to hear this case, is that it is going to possibly project the issues of affirmative action into the election season in a way that we have not seen, since the late 1990s. The case is going to be heard in October, just a couple of weeks before the general election. So a lot of people are very curious to see what the Obama administration's role is going to be and how it's going to play out in political races, possibly even in Texas, since this is a Texas case.
Well, Rick Perry retired as a state employee in January a year ago. And we broke this story in December when he was on the campaign trail, and it came as quite a shock to a lot of people back in Texas that he had retired without ever leaving his job. And so I'm digging into that law and finding out some really interesting things, including the fact that the state Senate sponsor of this legislation was unaware that this bill allowed Rick Perry to retire. One of the things that I think that you're beginning to hear from the sort of watchdog groups is we should at least know who's doing this. The thing that's really interesting about this case from my perspective is that, as a reporter certainly, is that we would not know about this if Rick Perry had not run for president, potentially, because Perry had to disclose this to the Federal Election Commission because they require that you disclose pension benefits that you have. I think that critics were very quick to jump on Perry for basically what they said was hypocrisy of calling for smaller government, calling for the insiders and political insiders to give up their lucrative perks. Well, here was like Exhibit A in lucrative perks. I think there are still a lot of really interesting questions about how a tiny group of veteran state elected officials are allowed to retire without ever leaving their jobs and boost their take-home pay, in Perry's case, by almost $100,000 a year.